Hey, what? Is this weird? I can't hear you. What's going on? Oh, this is. Oh, sorry, bro. Yeah, my schedule's wrong. My schedule. Oh, my schedule. Genevra's been out of town. Sorry, schedule's really off.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, Matt.
This is weird. This got
So
weird real quick.
we are recording. All right.
Even better.
No.
Remind me later.
Yeah.
All right.
Uh, hi, Ann.
Hi. All right. I'm checking out
All
now.
right. We're going to get going. And I hope you're not shy because that is going to be our intro forever. You know, like Gilligan's Island has sit right back and you hear a tale.
Yeah.
That will be
Okay.
ours.
All right.
So,
Let's
since
go.
this is our first podcast, I got to do an introduction.
Okay.
So I am Dr. House of the Real House MD, Hugh House. I go by Ty. So that's what our guest today will probably call me. And today I am talking about living sober with addiction, alcoholism with my good friend, Matt Waldron, who is one of my newer friends. I have only known Matt since I was, 14?
Yep, I think that's about right. So yeah, 40 plus years.
Okay.
Yes, we're still getting to know each other.
Okay. So we are going to get started.
All right, let's go. I'm excited.
So start off, just what is your story? We'll get into the living sober later, but what is your story from childhood? Big
I was
question.
born. Okay. Wow. All right. So
I'll
it
give you a
was
little help.
dark.
I
Okay.
want to know what your perception when you were young of both alcoholism and also drug addiction. So I'm talking about
Sure.
like your earliest memories when you were 10, 12, 14,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Probably negative on both, right?
Mhm.
Thought that the alcoholic was the bum on the street kind of situation. Lost everything, just stumbling around, and probably the drug addiction. Uh, so 70s, 80s, probably thought they were like long-haired hippies, or something that really wasn't my scene. Lazy, and yeah, that's didn't think highly of either one.
So, in my perception, I think I kind of thought that addiction was more the next level of partying. And I don't know if that's kind of more the cultural influence of like the rock stars or,
Right.
like the Jimi Hendrix was before us, but that kind of like that Jimi Hendrix story
Yeah.
or that John Belushi story, where
Yep.
it's just they started off drinking and then that led to drugs and that led to harder drugs. So that perception made me think it was something easily to avoid. You didn't party that hard and you wouldn't be addicted. I think the biggest one that I remember celebrity wise was Lenny Bias. But I
Right.
never thought of that as an addiction. I thought of
No,
that
I didn't think of that
he
as
was
an addiction.
partying and he had bad luck. But
Yeah,
that meant
exactly.
as a young, like as a high schooler, I was like, oh man, you better be careful because if you do anything, you could die, kind of thing.
Right. Right. And
Um,
I'm probably of that same thought. And I probably didn't think about a rock star or whomever being a drug addict. Probably didn't think John Belushi was a drug addict. Big fan, Blues Brothers and all that. But uh, when he died, I just thought, oh, bad luck. The guy overdosed, partied too hard, or did something. Never thought of it as an addiction.
so when you decided to stop drinking, did your attitude change about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I stopped drinking 30 plus years ago, it was definitely more about what was, I guess it was more about what was right for me, and really didn't think about the connotation or how it was perceived. And I was like, hey, this is what I need to do to get where I want to go. Um, because my drinking and everything up until then was my focal point for everything. Everything I did was all involved around drinking and partying and being loud and being fun. And then it was more about having to shift gears and trying to figure out what my next step was.
So around that same time, and obviously I was around you when that happened. And Matt's last day of drinking was my wedding. So I definitely knew that you were going off to stop drinking after my
Yep.
wedding. And at that time, I was in medical school, and I guess somewhere along the line, like somewhere high school, college, med school is when I started thinking of it more as a disease. But when I thought of it as disease, I kind of was like, there's nothing you can do about it. It's like heart disease, it's like allergies, whatever it is. If you have the disease, there's nothing you can do to avoid it. And I think that's what was pretty much being taught in school at the time. Is that kind of what your perception was?
I think my perception was, and it's probably for a long time still struggled with it. Is it a disease or is it a character flaw? Right? How is it that Ty and I can go to the same party, do the exact same things, but Ty can stop, but Matt has to keep going and can't stop? And so is it at the time it was more of what am I doing wrong and how come I can't, control that? As opposed to thinking of it as a disease. A lot of times when I think of it as a disease, I kind of think of it, it's I don't want to say crutch, but it's like it's out of my hands. This is what, these are the hand that was dealt. When I think of it as a character flaw, then I can kind of take ownership of it and make it work. This really depends on the day and the time. But now over maturity and learning more about myself and learning about things, I do understand it as a disease. And it is my character to have that disease, but it's also part of my character to live with it and combat it. Not that you ever beat it, but get past it.
So as I've gotten older, and I see a lot of problems with drugs and alcohol in my practice. So you don't just have drunk driving injuries, you have drunk living injuries. It's that injury that you're like, this person was drinking. A lot of hand injuries are from anger and hitting walls where you feel like
Right.
other people, you feel like alcohol's involved. Obviously the driving injuries, but also just the doing stupid stuff where you weren't careful enough injuries. And you see how much it can affect people's lives. But the drug addiction is really the more alarming thing. Like I remember one of my first patients when I was taking their social history, and I kind of like said, you start off with, do you smoke? And the guy was like, no, no, I don't smoke. And do you drink? No, no, I don't drink. And I was almost embarrassed to ask him, like, did he do intravenous drugs, which is pretty important in medicine? And he admitted he'd been a heroin addict for his whole life.
Right.
And I never knew that somebody could survive being a heroin addict. I thought you did it maybe for a year, and then you either OD'd or you went to rehab and got clean. I had no idea there were people out there surviving. But as a hand surgeon, I see a ton of hand infections from heroin addiction and different drug addictions. And the amazing thing for me is how many of them, when you see them in the office later after they've been to rehab, are just normal people, or they come in, young ones, they come in with their parents, and their parents are totally normal people. Or the ones who have been sober for 15 years and they just relapse once, they get a hand infection. And when they come back to your office, they've cleaned up again, and you just can't believe it was the same person you saw in the hospital. But that's kind of led me down the road to think of it more as self-medication of things like anxiety and depression. And I think we all have methods that we treat ourselves for the stuff in our lives. And sometimes I wonder, is it just bad luck that people fall into habits of treating it with drugs and alcohol, whereas maybe somebody else becomes a workaholic, somebody else becomes addicted to running ultra marathons, whatever it is? Do you have any? That's a long introduction. Do you have any thoughts on a big topic like that?
Well, I have lots of thoughts. First off, you use the term normal people,
Yeah.
and there's nothing abnormal about an addiction,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
so I think everyone has some sort of addiction, and you can be addicted to food, drugs, sex, shopping, stealing. I mean, you name it. video games, whatever it is. So, I don't think there's a right or a wrong way to deal with things, but it's I think if your question was, are there healthier ways to deal with anxieties and things like that? Sure, but I think it's a vicious cycle when people are like, if I can control a situation through drinking or drugs or whatever, then I won't get anxious, and then it just becomes this repeating circle that you just can't get out of. So yeah, there's always a better way, a healthier way, but I don't think it's always available, as easily available to people as the other stuff.
So on that topic of, sometimes it seems like everybody's addicted to something.
Sure.
Maybe that's not true, but I do feel like there's a lot of us who are addicted to something, and that's where I wonder of like you're addicted to golf. If at 12 you obviously had opportunity to play golf, but if you had fallen on golf as your crutch, uh, would that have ever is that a possibility that would have prevented an alcohol addiction, or is that just
No,
crazy?
that's crazy. That's crazy. As much as I wish, my golf addiction could cure my, cure my ills. For me personally, my drinking was all about low ego, low self-esteem, and just trying to be the loudest, funniest, and out party everybody. And I mean, it was easy to do around you because you're not that funny and you can't drink very much. So that's the reason I like to hang out with you. But so it really there are other issues as opposed to even if I was a great golfer or a great student, I don't think it would have given me that satisfaction that I wanted, that attention that I wanted, that I got through alcohol.
So sometimes I wonder, and I guess I go down this line maybe with athletes and with like rock stars or whatever. Sometimes I wonder if they have addictive personalities, and that is what drove them to be super successful, say as a guitarist or whatever. But that same addiction that got them addicted to guitar playing just switched over to drugs and alcohol, especially once they made it and maybe they no longer got that thrill out of the guitar. And I feel like I've seen that with athletes. Even you see it with professional athletes sometimes where they're so addicted to their craft, and maybe when they can no longer do it, they turn that into drugs or alcohol.
Yeah, it's so hard to say, right? Because it has to do, I mean, I think when you get down to an addiction, one basically when I think of addiction, it affects your life somehow, some way. Like somehow your life has become unmanageable because of this addiction. So whatever it is that we talked about, if you decide that you needed to go running instead of going to your child's first birthday party, because I got to get my miles in, that's an addiction. If you like, oh, I got to get up early to run, and then I go to my kid's first birthday party, that's something else. That's just a desire to want to get somewhere, in my view. But so I don't know if one replaces the other. If they become a great rock star, then they start taking the alcohol and the booze. I don't know. It's really an individual basis on what the underlying cause is to get them there.
So in my practice, I've had people who, I guess you're not replacing the drugs or alcohol with fitness, but I've definitely seen people use fitness as something that does help them along the way manage their stress.
Absolutely.
Everything. And sometimes they get injured, and sometimes they're very open about the fact, like, hey, what am I going to do? This is my crutch. Is that something you've seen?
Oh, absolutely. But it's also, for me, an exercise. A couple years ago, I went to a really good doctor, and he repaired my shoulder that I injured in a surfing accident. And
so was it a surfing accident?
yes, it was surfing. For the podcast, it was surfing.
I don't remember that.
Anyhow, we're moving on. HIPAA, won't allow me to talk about it. But I needed that structure of go because I used to go to work out daily. So my arm was in a sling, and I would go to a spin class just to get that, just to keep that regiment going with one arm, out just to keep that going. And there are things like that that I'm like, whoa, let's get healthy first, and then get back to doing everything I wanted to do. So yeah, there are times when the addictive personality takes over in other aspects of your life that you don't realize until you take a step back.
And then is there any role of like nutrition, say, like as people, become more aware of nutrition and nutrition for health and nutrition for good energy and things like that? It seems that somebody who was able to overcome either an alcohol addiction or a drug addiction would seem to be like, oh, this is easy. Like this is giving up some bad food would be so much easier. Or sticking with a nutrition plan would be so much easier. Do you think they have any correlation? Like, is it like been there, done that, or nothing at all?
Nothing at all, because again, it goes to why they were what, because I think everyone has a reason why they got addicted to whatever. And again, it's more about their internal chemistry. And so, if at one point I took everything, kind of got the alcohol thing taken care of, and then I was like, you know what, I want to eat better and feel better, and it was not about giving something up. It was just because I wanted to do something new. It wasn't replacing something else. So I consulted a friend's wife who told me about protein and things of that nature. Realized Twizzlers with every meal aren't the best things, and so I think it's more of about a maturity as opposed to an addiction or trading one for the other. Because again, any addiction there's an underlying cause to it that doesn't often translate to other areas of your life.
So I did a nutrition challenge, and you did it also with a bunch of friends last January. And I put a lot of money on one person who happened to be you, because I figured since you had quit drinking, it would be so easy for you to win the nutrition challenge. And I was so unaware of your Twizzler addiction that I lost a lot of money, and I just didn't predict that. I thought it'd be easy for you to quit Twizzlers.
Well, first off, it's progress, not perfection. Okay. And secondly, at that time, it was kind of the whole situation. Well, first off, I wanted to bankrupt you, and so you just needed my help once again. And the challenge I could have done if I really wanted to do it, but listen, I weigh like 125 pounds. I don't need to lose any more weight. I'm basically, I'm the most nimble guy you'll ever see. I can put my body in the knots. And at the end of the day, I didn't want to lose, honestly, didn't want to lose any weight. And inflammation was not a big deal at that time. So I bailed on it because I thought it was some, scam that you were running. But
And
that was the real reason.
as all my viewers have seen, you have an amazing physique. And
Thank
luckily,
you.
luckily, only probably my sister and my mom will watch this. But that was good. So to move on to living sober. So 31 years sober is a really long time. Congratulations.
Thank you.
But like, what are your thoughts about your life living sober? But also, I almost feel like there's becoming a little bit of a fad where people are starting to be sober curious, living sober, doing things like that, which wasn't around as much when we were growing up. So what's it like living sober, and what do you think about somebody who's sober curious, even though they may not have an alcohol problem?
So living sober obviously has worked out very, very well for me. Knock on wood, I got it on my first try, meaning I have not had a relapse, which is pretty rare. But it's a big shift, and as we get older, it's easier and easier to do, because when we were in our 20s and even in our late teens, we wouldn't everything we did, we weren't driving around the block without making sure we had beer or something with us to, always have alcohol part of it. But as you get older, people kind of like, oh, you know what, I don't feel as good the next day. So people start ratcheting it back. Some people, not everybody in our world, but a lot of people start ratcheting it back. And so that makes it a little bit easier on me. Sure, there are a lot of things that I wish. Here's what I miss about drinking. The only thing I miss about drinking, I don't miss being drunk. I don't miss being hungover. I don't miss anything besides there's a camaraderie that comes with drinking that I miss. Meaning, like, you guys will stay out late, or you guys will, I've never really had bourbon. I've never really had wine, because we were, all of my drinking was from 13 to 21. And, we were just trying to get as drunk as we could, and we're savoring that kind of stuff. So there's that kind of bonding experience that I miss, but everything else, everything else outweighs that bonding experience. So I'm not going to give it up. And as for people that are getting sober curious, I think today, now even more than ever, I think health is and fitness is such a big part of our daily lives. Social media, people that are, hand surgeons that are worried about your weight. I don't understand why they're worried about your weight if you're a hand surgeon, but all are these social media influencers now, and you can't turn it anywhere without worrying about your health. And I think people realize that alcohol, drugs, or whatever, what you eat affects every part of your life. So if someone is sober curious, more power to them. There's, I guess, being sober curious is great. Try it out. If it works for you, great. Whatever works for you, great. As long as you're healthy and committed to it, go for it.
Do you have any insight in why, like the functional alcoholic, like why is there the functional alcoholic who is able to keep the job, keep the marriage, all those kind of things, and somebody else, it just crashes down around them. Which, if it crashes down around you when you're young, you got a whole life ahead of you to
Right.
straighten it out. If it crashes down when you're old, you don't have quite as much time to fix the problem.
Well, I'll tell you this. So you say crashes down in the meeting rooms. They always call it when you hit your bottom, right?
Uh,
And again, it goes back to your individual experience. What my what my bottom is different than others. Mine was I couldn't graduate from college. I know other people that were getting DUIs, like 3 or 4 of them, and injured themselves or injured other people and kept drinking, and then kept going. So it's really, again, what their floor is, what their bottom is, what they're like, no more. I don't want this anymore. So yes, I was lucky that I got it on my first try, and I got it, when I was 21, 22. And so yeah, I didn't have shrapnel of a family that I hurt, or other people that I hurt. The only thing I've ever changed about my drinking was just the fear that I put my loved ones and my friends through when I was drinking. Because when I decided to stop, you and our friends were like, "Thank God, you needed to stop," and that was everything.
so when the whole thing is I guess nobody can get help until they're ready to get
Right,
help. Uh,
100%.
so you've probably been in situations where you're like, oh, that person needs help.
Yes.
And do people ever seek you out of curiosity?
Yeah, absolutely. I get that phone call quite often, and it's from all different, hey, my son's in college, to some guy's at a party and is usually hammered and is like, dude, I want to try the, sober. And I'm like, great, drunk guy, let's talk tomorrow. If you're serious, call me tomorrow. I'm there in a heartbeat. Um, yeah, so it's, but again, it doesn't work if they're not ready and open to take the help. And
And
I've had more experiences where that's the case.
and I would assume you can never make the first move. Like you're not being like, hey, call me if you wake up.
Yep.
Kinda.
I've no, it is one of those. It's like, yeah, there's been a couple where I'm like, if you ever want to talk, I'm around.
Uh,
Never get that phone call, but because it's they're not ready for it, or haven't gotten that phone call yet. Um, and again, I don't want to push it. I mean, it's but I'm here, and if they need it, and I think I'm pretty open about it to my network of people that this is my path and this is what I've done and this has worked out pretty well for me. So I'm here to help.
And then how do you handle it when parents call where clearly the kid's not ready? We have college age kids. I have kids out of college. How do you handle that? I'm sure parents have called you worried about their kid, but their kid has not made the connection yet.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. So my parents, when I was in college, were making that phone call to a friend of theirs who actually reached out to me and asked me to his house to have brunch one day, and over the weekend came in hungover as anything, and we had this talk, and I thought he was going to offer me a job. I was a senior in college, and it didn't. He was just telling me what he went through and what he was feeling, and I was like, yeah, okay, this is odd, and literally left his house and was like, oh my God, that's what I was feeling. And probably a month later, then I called him again and said, all right, what do we need to do to get past this? So it's about planting that seed. Um, and it's the same thing with the parents, like you said, now that would reach out to me and be like, hey, I'm here. I'm happy to talk to the parents. I'm happy to talk to the kid. But again, if they're not ready, it's not going to work. But I want them to know that I'm around, and that's it from when they are ready.
And then what's it like socially now, being out socially where people are still drinking? You hope most of them are moderate drinkers. What are your insights as a past middle age non-drinker?
Past middle age non-drinker. Wow. My insights are you still can't hold your liquor, and you are more obnoxious than most. But in all honesty, I always have a couple like rules. I always want to make sure I always have my own exit, to get out of the situation, because as the night goes on, and depends. I like smaller gatherings, but often in larger gatherings, and if it's real close and it's getting to be 10 o'clock or so, people get really like in your personal space as they start talking to you as they drink more. And and I get it, but I'm always like, okay, back off a little bit. But so I always want to make sure I always have my own exit, going. My interesting is part of my wife. She drinks and has a good time and can stay late. Usually for me, about 10 o'clock is a late night for me because that's when people start really getting over the tips of their skis. And that's when I need to ratchet it back. But she still wants to hang out with her friends. She's not drunk or anything like that, but she likes to keep going. So depending on where we are, I usually, can leave and she'll get a ride home with somebody else. And that works out well for us because it's what we both need to do in that situation.
Is it easier in your 50s than it was in your 30s, or it's the same?
Sure. It's the same. It is the same. I think as we get older, I think other people are more cognizant of it, and so they may be ratcheting it back a little bit. So there's not that hey, why are you drinking? Like hugging you or jumping on you, and they're drunk and I'm not. So
Yeah. And then parenting, and not just to your own kids, but being an uncle, and having family friends and all those kind of things. Uh, is it any different as far as maybe you worry about people or feeling like you should give advice, or is it more like people need to live their lives and make their own mistakes, and I'm here if anybody close to me, something happened to them?
it's
Like, do you
more
do anything different?
it's more of the second, right? Because the way I often think about it is if I had an allergy to chocolate, thank God I don't. But if I had an allergy to chocolate, I wouldn't tell you don't eat chocolate because it doesn't work for me. So
Uh-huh.
alcohol doesn't work for me. It could work for you. Chocolate could work for you. So live your life. If there's an issue, if there's a problem, I'm the first call. I will jump in immediately. But until it doesn't work, I kind of stand back and let you live your life.
So do you have any thoughts on just how, sometimes alcohol is too involved? Like we talked about golf. You you drink after you or during your golf game sometimes. Not you.
Right.
People drink when they play golf. You can't watch football without a beer commercial. I saw my first wine commercial during football today. Um, it's just so everywhere. Um, does that bother you at all? Does that not make a difference?
Nah, does make a difference.
And
Because again, it's like the chocolate, I mean, analogy, if I was allergic to it, I really wouldn't care that there's a commercial for it. It's not going to make me want to drink, or it's not going to make me want to eat chocolate. And a beer commercial doesn't make me want to go drink a beer. What I liked most about drinking was the friends and acting silly and the memories. It wasn't the actual opening of the beer or drinking a beer.
now some of these people who do you know anybody who's quit drinking not because they were an alcoholic, not because they had a problem, just they wanted to be 100% all the time? Like
Uh,
100% if you're drunk, you can be 100% having a beer or a glass of wine or something, but if you really want to be 100%, you wouldn't drink at all, probably.
yeah. I mean, I know people that have tried it, just to give it up for maybe a month, just to see. And yeah, there are definitely people that are out there because it works, it doesn't work. They want to see what it's like not doing that. They want to lose weight, and they stop drinking, and they feel that they feel sharper and clearer, and they keep going. I know a bunch of those people. Um, again, everyone's journey and path is different, and what gets them there. And they know my path is, my reasons are probably different than most or a lot. And what they need to do works for them, and what works for them doesn't necessarily work for me. And you know, I'm here bottom line.
Do you have any thoughts on alcohol compared to other drugs, like perceptions
It's,
over the time of your life?
so I would say, I probably I don't know. I probably looked down on those people with drugs. Alcohol was much more readily available and accepted socially. So, during our formative years, not like where it is today, where weed's basically legal everywhere, and you could get it at the gas station or whatever, or THC. Um, so, I think that's why alcohol played such a prominent role in my life because it was just everywhere and socially acceptable.
So do you worry about other drugs being everywhere
Yeah,
with kids
yeah.
with
Oh, totally. I definitely think that's going to be an issue, and we'll start reaping there'll be repercussions from that down the line.
yeah, it's kind of funny because even if you were the more rebellious kid or the more curious kid or that like Mikey likes it, he'll try anything kid,
Right.
like a lot of us would have no idea where to even find that stuff, So like we knew where to find beer, uh,
Sure.
but we wouldn't know where to find that other stuff. And that's always in the back of my mind of if you make it too easy to get, there's the whole idea that maybe, you hear people talk about that nothing should be illegal. And then, you wouldn't have this black market and crime and all those kind of things. But you're like, who knows what person is saved by the fact they can't get their hands on it.
Yeah, but I also think if you really wanted it, you could find it. Anything.
Yeah. I don't know. Your very first time, like where would so where would you even go to find it,
I wouldn't call you nerd. I would call you somebody else.
Yeah. So what would be your main takeaways if you were given a lecture to a bunch of young, sophomores in high school, somebody said, "Hey, we want you to come in." What would you be telling them?
What I'd be telling? Well, that's a good question. I would, you know, I guess there are a bunch of things I would tell them, right? And I'm not naive, and I'm never going to say to somebody, don't drink, don't do this, don't do that, because I don't think that's realistic. Um, but I would say, hey, live your life, but be true to yourself, right? If you know what you're doing doesn't make you feel good, or if it makes you, you know, you don't like what happens afterwards or how you feel after an event or something you do, probably something to think about, and maybe you can kind of ratchet it back. Um, I think it would be more of you only get one chance at a first impression. And so keep that in the back of your mind. when you're out there, when you're acting silly, when you're getting drunk or whatever you're doing, just keep it within the guardrails as much as you can. It's going to happen when you go over the guardrails, but make sure you're always got some room to come back into the middle.
So when I've seen a lot of people talk about addiction, one of the big problems I see is that they like to sometimes tell stories about when they were addicted in almost like a bragging way. Like, I used to be so cool. And they would tell maybe funny stories, exciting stories, but almost like bragging, and then switch gears to how it ruined their life, and then how everything's better sober. But it's almost like it defeats the purpose if your part of you is telling you how cool it was. Have you seen that at all?
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, it's like the guy who like had like one big wrestling match and keeps talking about a big win he had, and
It
he
was a
keeps
big
talking
loss.
about.
It was
Oh,
actually a big
I,
loss.
know.
It
I
was
wasn't
that
talking.
he was
Jesus.
75 pounds heavier than me, and I almost won. That was the point.
Okay,
It was a
okay.
story of courage.
And no one said where I was talking about you, but it's the same. It's the same thing. You know, I guess at the end of the day, I really wouldn't change anything that I've done in my past because it's got me where I am today, right? And again, I would change hurting anybody or putting my parents in fear or that I was going to hurt myself or somebody else. I would change that, but I'm very happy with where I am today. So it's all part of the dance, right? Everything that leads up to today is all part of it. So yeah, you might have had the greatest time ever the first time you start drinking, but as you go, for an alcoholic and an addict, the first time you go out and you get hammered, it chances are is like a never forget time of your life. But as you keep going, things start happening. You start lying. You start lying to yourself. You start lying to others. And the high of the very first time, you don't get that again. If any, it goes down and down and down and down. And if you ever go back to drinking again, what I've been told, you don't get to start up here. You start here and even lower because you feel bad about yourself and bad about everything. So keep that in the back of your head. And yeah, I might have been, the life of the party up here the very first time, but becoming the life of the party was down, down, down. But I'm glad I was because it got me here where I am today, if that makes sense. It's like, yeah, it was cool. It was great. It was great jet skiing and drinking a beer on the Severn River one time. But, over the times, those good times were fewer and far between. And, and I'm lucky that I didn't hurt myself permanently or anybody else. Didn't, get arrested. Didn't, do things that negatively affected my future. So
how are you going to now, as we start tying this up, how are you going to tie this into Rocky Balboa? Or do you want me to help you with that?
I think the name of the podcast is tying this up. And I am, because you've always been like Paulie, from the Rocky series. And, if you want to bring in Rocky about this, that's great. But, I think at the very end, if you really get into addiction and AA and all of that stuff, alcohol is Apollo Creed, right? It kicks your ass. It can, or drugs, or whatever your addiction is. But if you want it, if you really want it, and you're true about it, you can overcome it if you really want it. But to overcome it, you have to have the right support group around you, the right people, the right friends, and to get through it because it can be very isolating. But if you around an encouraging community, family, friends, it makes things a lot easier.
Okay. So
but I don't have that. So
here's my question. And this is a true thing in Rocky. It's a scene in Rocky 6, which is Rocky Balboa, right? So Rocky's old by this point, and he is basically a widow, doesn't have a lot going on in his life. And he decides to do this exhibition with Mason Dixon, who's the champ. And when he goes to explain to Paulie why he's doing it, Paulie's kind of like making fun of him. He's like, "What? You haven't peaked yet? What are you doing? I don't know how old he's supposed to be as a character, whether it's 55 or 65." But Paulie's like, what are you doing? You've already won. You've already done everything." And he goes on to explain that there's a beast inside him, and he never thought life would be as hard as it was. And he just needed this to basically like distract him from the beast, is what it appears to be. And the thing I always think about that is that he had to do this like physical activity to keep him going. But I wonder about, like, do other people who in older age, basically go their whole life not being addicted, and then when maybe they lose some of their distractions, become addicted, where they like, have you seen that in your life where older people, maybe they're like, "I'm going to retire and play golf every day," and then they tear the rotator cuff, their back starts getting hurt, and instead of retiring and playing golf, they start drinking whiskeys at noon every day? Like, is it something that people just aren't alcoholics, or is it something that everybody needs to be kind of aware of? Make sure you're filling your time with productive things.
You asked the longest winded questions ever. That's an interesting question because
You want me to say it shorter? Can
no,
somebody who's been somebody who has avoided addiction but a moderate drinker, never gotten in the way, can they in middle age or older age, when they don't have other distractions or
sure,
purpose, can they become addicted?
sure, and but they can become addicted to anything,
Uh,
right?
yeah.
If they are, all of a sudden they retire and they don't have to, fly around the world or whatever they're doing, they could become addicted to working out, to bird watching, to reading, to playing golf, to booze or whatever it is. Um, I would say that, that addictive personality might have been there all along. I don't know. And the beast earlier might have been, hey, I want to get to this level professionally. And that's all my focus. And once that goes away, they have to fill their time with something else. Um, Again, I think it's very hard to give blanket statements to addiction, to a disease, because it's such a broad topic that it's really hard to say this is what's going to happen, or this could happen to somebody, this won't happen to other people. It's just too broad of a subject.
So do you have anything, at least that, say, like working out? If you couldn't work out for 5 days, would you not feel yourself, like
Oh,
feel like
100%.
yourself, or
Oh yeah, yeah. And I've been in I'll call it cycles where I've like overworked out uh because of stress, that I'm like, oh, I'm going to do a double today, or do something like that. And then there are other times where I'm like, I'm going to do a double today just to see if I physically can do it. And when I say double, I mean it's like I'm going to go for a run and then go spin for a little bit, or do yoga or something like that. Um, so yeah. I mean, definitely, definitely it's out there.
and so what are your final thoughts on this topic?
Final final thoughts are, I don't understand why I'm talking to a hand surgeon about addiction. That is my number one uh, deal. And secondly, I don't understand why you had me take my shirt off. That was odd. And finally, I just think people need to be aware that addiction doesn't have to, I mean, yeah, it can be negative. And be real careful when you talk about addiction, it's got to be something that negatively affects your life. Somehow, some way negatively has an impact on your life. And again, that could be, too much time on the internet. It could be anything. So just be aware.
So one of the reasons I started off with this is because obviously I have the joke about why am I talking to my hand surgeon about this is that I have an interest kind of in wellness, in that I think a lot of our medical problems can be decreased with lifestyle changes.
Sure.
That means that that I say that, like, the heart disease, the diabetes, the obesity, those things are all kind of silent killers. And a lot of orthopedic injuries of chronic inflammation are something that you notice. You notice the pain, and when you go tell people to to eat healthy, exercise, those kind of things. It's not always easy to do, and a lot of that
Right.
is mental health problems, and sometimes it's stress. So if you're eating a ton of food to mask your stress, that's a food addiction. Maybe you're not eating a ton of food, but you can't eat the right food because of some kind of addiction. And maybe you can't exercise because your time is being taken up by other addictions. So that's why I was like,
Yep.
oh, let's talk to Matt about stress addiction, because there is a relevance to it. I discussed previously how alcohol, drugs directly affect my job, but it's just getting a little bit of insight how we all are dealing with stress and trying to guide people to healthier ways to deal with their stress, things that are beneficial to them instead of something that's actually hurting them. But when you get into uh, addiction and addiction problems, that can be literally the very first thing. Do not stop, do not pass go. Take care of this first. So that's why I was like, oh, let's start with a hard hitting topic and go from there.
Yeah. No, and it's a relevant topic, right? Because stress will never go away.
Yeah.
And how you deal with it, today might be different than the way you deal with it 30 years ago, but you're still dealing with it, and you got to make sure you're dealing with it the best way you can, the healthiest way you can. And when you started off by talking about guys coming in with hand infections from, I just was thinking, my emergency room visits in college, I first time I got stitches was in college from a alcohol related incident. Everything was broken leg. Everything was alcohol related, and it's funny now they're few and far between.
Good. All right. Well, we'll wrap it up so you can
All
get
right,
some dinner.
all right, buddy.